Hello everyone, welcome to LimeGuru channel. In this video, we will learn about TypeScript. So the first topic that we are going to discuss is what is TypeScript. What is TypeScript? So TypeScript it's a new programming language which helps you to write your JavaScript programs at scale. It's a new programming language which helps you to write JavaScript at scale. Now, when JavaScript was already there, why TypeScript is required? Why there is a new programming language to write JavaScript code? That's a valid question. So we will discuss about some shortfalls within JavaScript language, and then we will discuss about that how TypeScript is adding benefit. Instead of using JavaScript, why you should go for TypeScript. So we'll discuss about all of those shortfalls in just a few minutes, but let's cover what is TypeScript first. So TypeScript is a new programming language which helps you to write JavaScript programs at scale. So behind the scenes, whatever program you write in TypeScript, it is written with in the files with .ts extension. And whenever you run your TypeScript code, behind the scene, it gets converted into JS files only. It gets converted into JavaScript only. So behind the scenes, it's a JavaScript only. The only difference is that it provides certain added features, some certain added flexibility, certain added benefits which you don't find in JavaScript. So it's a new way of writing your JavaScript code which helps you to get better on the problems which exist in the JavaScript. And as I told that we'll discuss the shortfalls in JavaScript in just a few minutes. So behind the scenes, it transcompiles into JavaScript only. It compiles, so it transcompile your .ts code get transcompiles into .js files only. So your web framework is still using the JavaScript notations only, JavaScript files only, your JavaScript code only. The only difference is that you will write your code in TypeScript programming language, and behind the scenes it gets converted into JavaScript files, and your web framework will eventually use JavaScripting only. So TypeScripting was introduced because it helps you to manage write your JavaScript code efficiently and in a scalable way. So if you are building an enterprise level web application, then you will need to have lot of JavaScript codes. If there is a lot of dynamic experience within your website, it's going to be difficult to write it efficiently in JavaScript, and you will not be able to scale much in JavaScript. So TypeScript is a programming language which helps you to write these JavaScript functions or programs efficiently and scalable way using TypeScript language. And as I told you that TypeScript is nothing, it's a wrapper over JavaScript only, and you can say it's a superset, or you can call it as a superset of JavaScript also. You can call it as a superscript of JavaScript. What I mean by superset, because it has all the features of JavaScript, plus it has certain added benefits, added functionalities which helps you to do lot of things in a much better way as compared to JavaScript. And we will discuss about all of those added features in just a few minutes. So now we will discuss about that why TypeScript came into picture. Let me write down here why TypeScript. When JavaScript was already there, then why TypeScript came into picture. Now we will discuss about certain shortfalls of JavaScript. So JavaScript, as you know, it's a scripting language, right? It's a scripting language for your web frameworks, or you can use JavaScript on the server side also. So it's a scripting language which helps you to give dynamic experience to your website. You can have custom functions based on the user experience onto your website, built using JavaScript based on the functions you have written or the logic you have written in your scripting language. Now this was designed keeping in mind that you will have you will not have much of the JavaScript code within your web frameworks, But now as the time grew, I mean, it was designed some 20 years back with the mindset that you will have few lines of JavaScript code and it will give some added experience onto your website. But as the time passed by, the web framework became so popular, internet became so popular, that in today's websites there are a lot of dynamic behaviors. You have thousands of lines of JavaScript code running behind the web application, and when we have so many code, it becomes difficult to manage so many JavaScript files. It becomes difficult to manage, and because it becomes difficult to manage, it leads to error prone programming language also. And it is practically possible that many times developer has to face JavaScript issue onto the web pages. Their web pages breaks because of something breaks in the JavaScript, in the code at runtime, and it is difficult to find the errors, difficult to identify the errors at the compile time, difficult to identify errors at compile time. So, and one of the example of this is that why it is difficult to find the errors at compile time. Let's say if you have defined a variable a equal to hello, let's say, which is a string. Now later on, let's say if you start using a equal to 12, which is a number, then JavaScript will not give you an error at the time of when you are writing this code. It will work fine. But when you render the web page with this kind of logic, and you were not expecting a to be a number, but it came out to be a number, at that point of time your code will break at runtime onto your browser, and it will give a very bad experience onto your web page. So you might have to one of the common thing developers do is they try to log everything onto the console. So they use console.log statements so that they can debug any problem within their JavaScript code at later point of time onto the web browser. There is no way to debug your code before running your web application. So this is also one of the shortfall of JavaScript. And you cannot organize your code in a efficient way. I mean, you keep on writing JavaScript files, you keep on adding more and more files, and over a time it becomes very clumsy that you have so many JavaScript files, and it's very difficult to do any refactoring kind of a thing. It's very difficult to move your code here and there, to reuse your code. It's very difficult to organize your JavaScript code. So all of the things leads to a bigger problem at a web frameworks when you are writing your applications at an enterprise level. So JavaScript is, I'll say, it's very I mean, over a time you will start getting a bad experience when you start writing your web frameworks at scale at an enterprise level. Now all of these shortfalls are covered within TypeScript. So how TypeScript solve all of these problems? So first of all, TypeScript has a support for data types. So it has a support for data types. So if you have defined, let's say this thing, if you have defined a equal to hello, you can say it that it is of type string, and if you will try to do a equal to 12, it will give you error. This programming language will not let you store any numbers onto a, because you have defined it as a data type of string type within this new programming language, within this TypeScript language. So it helps you to bind your variables with some data types, and then it's going to be less error prone. So because you have data types, so it's going to be less error prone. You're not going to get these kind of errors which is related to the data type because of this feature. It also gives you certain other features. Let's say it has a concept of classes, interface, so you can create your JavaScript programs in a object oriented fashion. Like if you're familiar with Java or any other object oriented programming language, so you can write your JavaScript code also using classes and interfaces in an object oriented fashion, in an OOPS manner. So this helps you to organize your code better. So if you have defined your entities in the form of a classes and interface, so this helps you to manage your code better, so that you can relate what all entities relate to what, instead of just doing everything at random, and then when your code grows over a time, you gets lost, like what all things are where, right? If you don't have a structured classes, structured interface, it's going to be very challenging for you at later point of time, that how your code is structured in terms of entities and objects. You can create objects for your classes also, and then you can use those objects within your TypeScript code. And as I mentioned, all of these things, whether you are defining data types, classes, interface, objects, anything you are defining behind the scene, it gets converted into JavaScript file only. So you will do all of these things in .ts file, in .typescript extension file, but behind the scenes everything gets converted to .js file. So you're going to get the same code behind the scenes if you would have written in JavaScript, but from your programming experience perspective, you are going to write it in TypeScript. At runtime, it's going to be changed into, at the compile time, it's going to be changed into the JavaScript files. Now, one other feature I'll talk about is that it gives you a feature of defining namespaces and modules within your TypeScript files. So what I mean by namespace and modules, so again, if you're familiar with Java or Python, so you can structure your code into modules, and namespaces and modules is in TypeScript is similar to the same. You can structure your code, you can structure your different logic in the form of namespaces and modules. And one of the thing which is again beneficial from the tooling perspective is that it helps you to debug your code also. So you can have ID, let's say you can run TypeScript code on Visual Studio code editor, and then you can do live debugging. You can put debug pointers onto your code, and you can do live debugging onto your TypeScript code. During the debug time, at the runtime only, behind the scenes it will run JavaScript, and it will show you, it will let you do the debugging of your TypeScript code on the fly seamlessly. You don't need to do anything. Similar to Java or Python, you can start putting breakpoints within your TypeScript code. You can start putting debug pointers, and then you can debug your application, and that ID will help you to debug your TypeScript code, the JavaScript code, very seamlessly on the fly. So this is again a great feature, because in JavaScript you cannot do debugging. And as I mentioned, many times developer used to put console.log statement, which is a bad practice, but they don't have any other option. So they put console.log statement so that they can catch some errors onto the web browser. But now you can do live debugging by putting the breakpoints. So this will also help you to catch errors while writing the program only. And as I mentioned, so you can catch errors at the compile time only. What I mean by that is, let's say if you have defined a string and a hello, and you are defining a number, so your ID will give the error right away. You will not be able to compile your program into JavaScript. Your ID will show that there are certain errors in your files. You need to fix those errors first before you transcompile into JavaScript file. So it helps you to catch errors while writing your program only. So all of these shortfalls are covered, all of the shortfalls which we discussed are covered by TypeScript language, and that is why it is also called superset of JavaScript. That whatever you have in JavaScript, you continue to use that along with certain added feature. Like all of these features are added features over JavaScript. So if you start writing your JavaScript code in TypeScript manner, using TypeScript programming language, you get all of these features, and behind the scenes your code gets converted into JavaScript only. So that is why TypeScript is becoming very popular. Instead of writing JavaScript directly, start using TypeScript and start getting all of these advantages. Now we'll discuss about that how TypeScript works. We'll discuss about how TypeScript works. So in order to use TypeScript programming language, you need to what you need to install is TSC, which is TypeScript compiler. TypeScript compiler. Now, if the easiest way to install TypeScript compiler is, if you have Node installed in your system, then you can directly install TypeScript using npm package manager, npm install tsc, and it will install TypeScript compiler onto your system. And once you have TypeScript compiler installed on your system, after that what you need to do is, in any IDE, let's say you are using VS Code or you are using any text editor, you can name your file as ts extensions. Let's say this is employee.ts. You can write your TypeScript code in employee.ts, and then you have to run a command tsc and then your file name, let's say employee.ts. So once you run this command tsc, TypeScript compiler will convert this file into employee.js, and then this file would be used within your web framework. So tsc helps you to convert your TypeScript files into a JS file, and it will create the file into the same folder in parallel to this file where your TS file is there. You will get the JS file as an output in parallel to this file only. And this is certain configuration. You can change this configuration, like in which folder you want to get JS files. And there are a lot of other configurations also, which you can specify in two ways. Either you can specify while running the command, let's say tsc employee.ts, and then you can give certain arguments which is related to configuration of tsc, or you can define tsconfig.json. So whenever you will run tsc command now, so it will use tsconfig.json, and it will use all the configuration related to tsc which is available in tsconfig.json, and then after that it will compile and convert your program from ts to the JS files. So this is how it works. So it transcompiles your TS files into JS files, and it uses TSC, which you can install with a Node package manager. You can run npm install TSC and you will get TSC within your system, and you can define TSC configuration in tsconfig.json file, where you can put some templates, or you can define a template for your configuration so that all of your tsc command uses the same configurations. So this is how you can define it. Now I'll tell you about the support framework within tsc. So where all this TypeScript TS programming language is supported. So TS is supported almost everywhere. Any web framework you can think of, it's supported there. Now whether it's a node.js or it's a Vue, let's say you are using Angular, you are using Ionic, you are using React, any web framework you can think of, TS is supported everywhere. So TS, you can rely on TS, and you will not face any compatibility issues with your web framework. Any web framework you are using, be it on the mobile side, on the web application side, so you can rely on TS to code your JavaScript code, right? So you can use this programming language for any of these frameworks, and in fact there is good documentation, sample codes available on official TS website for all of these frameworks, that how you can embed TypeScript and how you can start using TypeScript within any of these frameworks. I'll also show you some sample code of TypeScript, that how TypeScript code looks like, and how, so that you can visualize it better, that how you have to code. If you're already familiar with JavaScript, then what it takes for you to move to TypeScript programming language. So I'll give you a flavor of that also in just few minutes. So in terms of support, it's supported on all the major web frameworks, and you can blindly rely upon TypeScript. So that is one of the good thing about TypeScript. Now I'll show you about some of the sample code. So here I want to show you some of the examples of TypeScript. So here what I'm trying to show you, it's a function, and now here it's a class. So you can see that in this function you're defining a add function which is adding two numbers left and right, and in two numbers left and right you have defined the data type as number. So this is the additional feature which TypeScript provides. You can associate any variable with a data type. If you try to pass any other thing in this function, that then you should be able to get the errors within your TS files right away, right? So you can only pass numbers here in this function, otherwise your program will break. So you can associate variables with the number, and this is how the function look like. And this is the example of a class, that you can create a class. Let's say there is a person class where you have a name, age, salaries. You can define the constructor also, and you can override the toString function also. So this is similar to Java. If you have written your program in Java in an object-oriented fashion, so this is similar to that only, that you can write your code in an object-oriented fashion. You can have classes, you can have interfaces. Now you can define objects of these classes, you can use functions, so whatever you want to do. So you will have better modularity within your code, you will have better structure of your code, and you should be able to manage your code efficiently and in a cleaner way because of the concepts of these classes and functions, and the debugging tool that will let you to debug all of these classes, functions within your IDE only. So this is just one flavor of TypeScript program that I wanted to give you, so that you can relate that how this code looks like in TypeScript. So that's it what I wanted to cover for TypeScript. So just to give you a recap of what we learned. So we learned about the TypeScript programming language. What is TypeScript programming language, which is a superset of JavaScript, and it transcompiles into JavaScript only in the background. Then we discussed about why it is required, where we discussed shortfalls of JavaScript and certain added features of TypeScript, like data types, classes, interface, objects, namespaces, modules. We discussed about that. Live debugging we discussed. And then we discussed like how you can run your TypeScript code using a TSC utility, transcript compiler, which converts your TS file into JS files. And then we talked about like where all it's supported, and then we looked at some sample code. So I hope you got the concept of TypeScript. If you like this video, do press the like button, do share this video with others, and please subscribe LimeGuru channel to support us. Thank you.